Imagine there was a book about how to become an effective teacher. Well, now there is, and you can find it online and at most bookstores. 30 Insights for New Teachers to Thrive is a book and a fantastic Christmas present for fellow educators, written by Curt Richards, a now retired science teacher, author, and legendary educator. This week on Legendary Educator, I discuss with Mr. Richards what it means to be a teacher and the building blocks for being an effective educator. Hello, teachers from around the world, and welcome to Legendary Educator, the podcast that helps you improve your performance in the classroom and have more engaged and motivated students. My name is Ramis Takawi. I'm a teacher and instructional coach, and I created this podcast because I'm passionate about education and about students achieving their highest potential. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes as they drop. All right, let's get to know our guest this week.
Hello, my name is Curt Richards, and my students in high school call me by Mr., but when I taught adults, they just call me by my first name, Curt. In the 1st of September, I retired from teaching after 40 years. I taught middle school for 4 years, and then the rest of the time in high school, and then ultimately at a massage school, I taught anatomy. Years ago, my favorite teacher was actually my first grade, and then she became my 5th grade teacher. Her name was Miss Searles, and she encouraged me to pursue my creativity. I always did things a little different than everybody else, and instead of chastising me, she encouraged it. And that, I think, obviously had some kind of effect on me from that point on.
Okay, we're going to be talking about the book extensively in a minute, but
Okay.
I always begin with the origin story. How did you become a teacher in the first place?
Okay. I had no plans on being a teacher. Matter of fact, when I was always interested in sciences, and I wanted to be a veterinarian. I even started Clemson University in pre-veterinary medicine, and then eventually stayed into what's called animal agriculture. And that was where I was heading, at least to some degree, whether it be farm work, working with animals. I took care of, I had jobs in dog kennels, I had jobs in stables with horses. But at the same time, I also was involved with some community activities, church activities. And all along, people would say, wow, you ever thought about teaching? You really get the information across. And I was like, yeah, right, no way. But as time went on, I graduated college and worked for a company for a little while. And then I started thinking more about it. And it was something that I just felt, it just kind of kept coming back to me. So I decided to go back to college and get my certificate, and went back and did my student teaching and all, and got my first job, and it's history from there. So it wasn't the kind of thing that I intended on for many years, but I think it really made me a better science teacher because I studied the sciences pretty deeply, I guess you could say, not really planning on making lesson plans and teaching,
Right.
but that's the way it worked out.
At the end of your career, you decided to write a book, and
That's
the book
right.
is called
30 Insights for New Teachers to Thrive.
So the first question here is why? Why bother
Why?
writing a book? Writing a book
Okay.
obviously is a lot of work. It's the sitting down and the writing and the thinking and the outlining and the publishing.
Exactly.
Why?
Well, I think the reason was I've been interested in writing for quite a while. I'd actually published a young adult novel about 20 years before.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So writing for the last 20 something years has been kind of a hobby. But I basically, in leaving teaching, I wanted to leave something for the new generation of teachers. Actually, when I left my last the job at as an anatomy teacher, I was mentoring the person who was going to take my position. But at that time, I'd already written the book. But that was the idea, to kind of be a mentor and to give teachers kind of a no nonsense book, not something you would get in an education class with
Right, right.
all the jargon and everything, but this is what you're going to face, and this is the way to handle it.
Hmm.
And I knew that teachers didn't have a lot of extra time, so I made these chapters, which I call insights, because I think they're insightful. I made them very short, maybe 3 pages tops, and there's 30 of them. They all have very practical titles. I won't read the whole thing, but just a couple of them. The first one is Monitor and Adjust, Classroom Management and Classroom Rules, Teaching at various learning styles, etc.
Give me your
So
top 5. I want to know what you're talking. I did look at your book. You have 30 chapters, and so I
yes,
think 25 points or something. What are the top 5 most important in your opinion?
the most important. First off, I start with an introduction called "The Heart of a Teacher."
Hmm.
And if you want me to read some of that, I can. But
Let me
then
stop you. Let me stop you
yes,
there. I love the heart of a
okay,
teacher. I'm a firm believer that being a teacher, teaching, it's in your genetics, it's in your being, right? Even if you're not in the classroom, if you're not teaching, you're still a teacher.
exactly.
Is that what you talk about? Like, how do you define a teacher? What is the heart of a teacher?
Exactly. I think that you have to, it's like it's in your core,
Yes.
that when you start, I mean, I give an example of, I can be digging in the garden and I can find some worms, and I'll start thinking about ways that I could present this to some students and what I could tell them about connections in nature.
Uh-huh.
So it's always with you, and you're
Yes.
always seeing something, thinking about, this is the way I could present that.
Hmm.
But number one, as I've said in here, you have to love your students and love what you teach.
Yes.
If you don't, now I'm not saying all students are lovable, but you have to,
You try your best.
you try your best, and you try to, you try to love the unlovable, and it's easy to love the lovable.
Hmm.
And but when you go to honestly, when I would go to be on my way to school every morning, I would picture certain classes, maybe my first class, whatever, or any class that was maybe a challenge, and I would try to I wouldn't close my eyes because I'm driving, but I would try to picture every student that's sitting in there and their name, and I would think a positive thought, positive intention about each one. You've got to love these students. I don't care what the age is.
Hmm.
And you've got to love the fact that you're a teacher. No, not every day is going to be wonderful. You're going to come home some days and say, why do I do this? But but you're going to love, you're going to always get pulled back to that. And so I think that is really the heart of a teacher. I'll just read one quick little
Sure.
blurb here.
Sure.
It says, you can study and apply all the brain science that research has to offer. You can sit in college classes and professional workshops and take volumes of notes about how to organize a classroom and how to present your material. You can read 100 how-to books on teaching and classroom management. You can scour the internet and read all the teacher blogs available. You can even construct your lesson plans so that they correspond perfectly with state standards. But if you don't love what you do and love what you're teaching and love who you're teaching, then you will never be a highly effective teacher. And the classroom is probably not the place you should be. That is
Amen.
in my introduction as Heart of a Teacher.
Nice. That's a perfect introduction.
That's kind of where that comes from. And then you asked me about some of
Your
the
top
other.
5. Yeah. What are your top 5 points?
I start off with number one, and they're not really in order of what's
Mm,
most important,
mm,
really just how they came to my brain.
mm.
But I thought number one, I thought was monitor and adjust. That basically means a lot of things. But when you go into the classroom, there's going to be something almost every day that's going to change your plan, whether it's administrators saying we have an assembly or a late bus and a 12 kids come in. There's something you got to be able to monitor and adjust.
Mhm.
Also monitor and adjust how you're teaching something. If you're not getting through, you don't just say, oh well, y'all get it. You go at it from a different angle. That was probably my first one. everyone learns at a different rate.
Mhm.
And that was another chapter. That kind of goes along with teaching to various learning styles. So talked a lot about that.
Mhm.
Then I went down to a little bit of science involved. There's some brain science in here. One is called Help Build a Better Brain Through Repetition and Spacing. So it's a little more nuts and bolts about how you teach what you teach so that the way the human brain works. And I put one called Forgetting Has Its Place in Learning. You can't expect all of your students to get it the first time. Actually, having a little break time where they actually forget, your brain is still working. And then when you come back to it for review or the next time, it's going to stick a little better, for lack of a better word. So there were several chapters dealing with how the students' brains actually work. And I think we need to understand what we're dealing with there. And then one or two last ones, I had a couple on. One is professionalism. How to be a professional, how to act professional, how to come across to your students and your parents and administration in a professional way. Also, there's several about. One is called redirection versus rejection. And I think that too often we just, in our mannerisms, it might be our body language, it might be our tone, but we reject a student if they do something wrong or say something in error. If they are participating, they are attempting to get your attention, and and that's a time for learning. And so we can redirect them rather than reject them.
Right. So it's working on your automatic response.
Exactly. Learn, and I've always said that one thing that I feel like was missing in teacher training courses was bringing in somebody from the theater arts to actually train people a little bit, because face it, teaching is a performance art.
Yes.
I mean, we're not up there doing a dog and pony show, but how we come across to the students, our posture, where we stand, what we do, how our voice inflects, makes as big a difference to them as the material that we're getting across.
Yeah, I love how you said that, because I saw myself in the classroom as the performer, and the students are my audience, and so I not only have to educate and engage my audience, I also have to entertain them somehow, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
And we have to remember too that it depends on what level you're teaching, but when I taught high school, they can pick up on a fake after 30 seconds. So you can't come in there with a big fake dog and pony show like, oh, I'm going to entertain y'all. This is cool. It's kind of got to be, like we said at the beginning, it's kind of got to be part of you. But then that comes with practice. You start, as I heard somebody tell me a long time ago, that you're the only certified teacher in the room. And what they're saying was, there's like 30 other teachers in there. You're going to be learning from those students. So learn from them and learn how to engage them. One of the big things I'll say quickly about that is, when I taught my student teachers that I taught, one of the first things I did, now I'm kind of dating myself here because we had blackboards and whiteboards and all, but I would not allow them to use technology for the first 2 weeks. I would hand them a piece of chalk, and I would say, you get this chalk and you get the students. You learn to engage with the students before you start turning on all the bells and whistles and PowerPoints and whatever. And because if you can't do that, the other's not going to matter.
Right.
But then I came from a time early on where high tech was colored chalk, and that's about what it was.
Yeah, and the projector.
You were lucky if you had an overhead projector.
Right.
But if something went wrong, and this goes back to monitor and adjust, I don't know how many times I turned on the projector and the bulb blew, or something happens. We've even had power go out in the school. You pick up that whiteboard marker or that chalk and you keep going.
Yeah, you have to be flexible and you pivot when you need to.
Absolutely.
Taking from your book, let me ask you, what is the formula for a successful teacher?
The formula, well, That's a good question. I would say kind of some that we've already covered. Number one
Hmm.
is really love what you're doing,
Okay.
um, and have a true caring for these students. That's number one. But then beyond that, be willing and understand this job does not end when that bell rings at the end of
Hmm.
the day.
Hmm.
So know your material. Know what, and not just your material, but know how to present it in an orderly fashion to where A goes to B that goes on to C in that way, so you're not confusing the students.
Hmm.
Don't be, I always looked at test that you would give them. Now, here again, this might not involve as much of elementary as it does at high school, but
Mm.
tests are primarily motivators. Motivate students to study and try to learn the material. You're not really using it as a teaching tool per se.
Right.
So how you test the students and give them any kind of get feedback from them is very important. So that you don't make them feel like the grade, they will internalize it as if, okay, I made a D, therefore I'm a below average person,
Yes.
or I'm stupid. I've had students say, well, that's the best you can expect from me because I'm
Hmm.
not smart.
Hmm.
I think our grading system does that to students.
Yes.
And so I think being able to listen to the student as well when they're asking a question, or sometimes when they get off on something else, you follow that thread, but you keep control.
Mm.
If I'm talking about, let's say I'm in my biology class and I'm talking about cells, and I mention how cells grow and how cancer cells are uncontrolled growth,
Hmm.
then Johnny raises his hand and say, "Well, my grandmama has cancer."
Mm.
Now, do you just like, okay, well, that's bad, and then you move on, or do
Mm.
you follow that a little bit? Well, he brought that up enough to where he cares. So if you're going to connect with that student on the material as well as a personal level, you follow that a little bit. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Would you tell us a little bit about it? What kind of
Mm.
cancer or when? And you follow it a little bit. Then you segue back into your
Yes.
material.
Right.
So I think being open to the students and where they are is vital. It's not just you up there. I've always said that, and this is my personal opinion,
Mm.
there's a difference between a teacher and an instructor.
Yes.
An instructor, here's the material, boom. You take it and learn it, and you're going to do it my way.
Hmm.
The teacher teaches. The teacher is willing to back up, move around, go to the right or the left, whatever they need to do to get the material across.
Right.
and
Yeah.
and yeah, there's some responsibility to the students. Occasionally you get these students who will just sit back, and we used to say they'll sit back and say, learn me. you know well, obviously it's up to them to learn it, but it's up to us to make it palatable so that it can go in more easily.
And not only
And
palatable, but I think we're living, in an era where if you're just an instructor, you
mhm,
are, literally obsolete, right? Because you have AI and ChatGPT and the
exactly.
internet and Google
Hmm.
and I mean YouTube and I mean all these other channels that are taking your job from you. And so a teacher, I always say in parentheses, it's a coach, it's a mentor, it's a
Hmm.
guide. It is not just a teacher because you can teach all day, but are the students
Exactly.
learning from you?
Exactly.
Right.
100%. And
Mm.
and all these other things that you mentioned are wonderful tools. And I've always said you can go to some of these internet channels
Hmm.
and learn almost like how to do heart surgery. I don't know, but you
You
could
can
learn,
literally anything.
everything.
You can fix your
But
car just on a YouTube channel,
absolutely.
right? Yeah,
I always
yeah.
go to them. I have a leaky faucet or something. Boom, that's where I go. So
Exactly.
there's a place for that,
Hmm.
but you cannot replace that human connection.
Absolutely.
And I
Hmm.
feel like I've heard people say, well, our teacher's going to be obsolete one day. Our teacher's going to be replaced by some robot or and I really, I can't say what government will do once in a while, but I can say that I hope not, because I don't think we can ever be truly replaced, because, there is no computer that matches the human brain. And we can, if we care enough,
Hmm.
it goes back to the heart of the teacher,
Yes.
we can watch even the students' inflections and their body language and tell, okay, they're not getting this. And then find a way that we can.
I mean, I do agree with you there, but I have used the word obsolete before in my
Hmm.
episodes and my videos, right? And I
Right.
always say if you are a teacher who goes in and you throw information and stuff at the students, you are an obsolete kind of teacher because that's not what the students want anymore. I mean, unless
Yeah.
you're, accommodating to all of the new technology, unless you're pivoting your mindset that you're not the exclusive owner of the information,
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
you have to mold yourself into something more than the instructor, like you said, more than
Hmm.
just a teacher.
Exactly.
Mm.
And I think too, it helps. I have found success in, like you said, ownership of the material. I have found success in using personal stories.
Mm. Mhm.
Especially like as a science teacher, I would tell and it has a lot to do with what you've done in your background. And I
Mhm.
did a lot of farm work. I did a lot of work with animals, lot of enjoyed hiking and still do things of this nature. So I would bring in personal stories about one time when I was working with this horse and this happened or that happened, and bring it into the material that I'm
Yes.
teaching.
Mhm.
So they love to hear this kind of stuff. They just
Mhm.
don't want you to give here's that they feel like, well, I can read a book, but
Or watch a
that's what's
video.
going to exactly.
Right.
That's what's going they're going to remember. And
Mhm.
I've had students tell me, even the adults that I taught the last 12 years, they would say, I remember your little joke, because
Mhm.
a sense of humor is very important. I remember you when you made a little joke about that, or when you told the story about the time this happened or that happened.
Mhm.
That helped me remember that when a test came along.
Yes.
So I think being vulnerable enough to open up your own life to a degree, and to things that have you have experienced. They love to hear your personal experiences, and they love to tell you their experiences.
What was your biggest challenge in your career as a teacher?
My biggest challenge overall probably was, and I don't mean this if any administrators are watching, that we need administrators, we need good
Mhm.
ones, but a lot of it was more the administrative function of the school
Mhm.
that was a lot of times a challenge.
Mhm.
Just to give one thing that popped in my head was at the beginning of the year, we would get into our meetings and they would tell us, now how you start off your classroom sets the tone for the
Mhm.
entire year. Oh,
Mhm.
that's great. Then I'd go in my class and I'd have 40 something students, and I would say, I don't even have enough chairs for these people. And they'd say,
Mhm.
oh, well, we're going to let it all settle out. In a few days, some of them will be leaving. I'm thinking, is this a way to set a tone?
Mhm.
you know, we used to joke and say the administrators would look out the window the first day of school and say, there's students coming. you know, so, I think that was a big challenge, is that something getting in the way of what I had planned every day. And that's where
Right.
some of the monitor and adjust and
Yes.
being able to deal with, and just accepting and having a plan B and a plan C for that sort of thing. So, more so than parents, occasionally, most all the time in my 40-year career, the parents they were very helpful and
Mhm.
concerned and caring. Occasionally, I could tell stories of one or two that would, get you in the table and tell you, I pay your salary,
Right.
and this
Right.
sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Mhm. Mhm.
But overall, it wasn't the parents, and it wasn't necessarily the rowdy students. Yeah, there's a few that's going to challenge you, and they're going to, and if you're teaching, say, 10th grade, they've had 10, 11 years practice in giving teachers hard times. So,
Right.
so they're
Yeah.
professionals at what they do.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to have those, but you're going to also have many, many, many success stories of
Of course.
folks that came in with bad attitudes, and you were able to bring them to your side, so to
Yep.
speak. But I would say anything that gets in the way of my plan for the day
Mm. Mm.
was probably one of my biggest challenges. That I'll probably think of 4 or 5 things after this is over that that I'll say, well, I should have said this or that. But I don't think any of the major challenges I had to do with the actual teaching.
Okay.
Some of it had to do with just, especially when I taught higher level, like
Mm.
AP courses,
Right.
had to do just with knowing the material and studying very deeply. This sort of thing. That was a challenge. That was a positive challenge that kept
Right.
me going. That wasn't something that got in the way. So
You'll be
that,
surprised how many people have the same answer regarding administration.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
unfortunately. In your opinion, should there be a course for administrators on like sort of how to engage your teachers successfully so that they can do their jobs well?
Oh, well, yeah, I absolutely think so. I think number one though, and this might just be in my state or my county, but
Mm,
you could be a teacher for 3 years, and then once you got your administrative certification, you could become administrator.
right, right.
You don't, I mean, your first year teaching, you're kind of bumbling through. Your
Hmm.
second year, you're correcting the mistakes you made the first year. And
Hmm.
the third year, you're starting to kind of lift off the ground a little.
Right.
I think that administrators should have to have a minimum of 5 years in the classroom.
Yes, yes, agreed. Mm,
And even more. And the administrators that I've had that were wonderful, and I've had some wonderful
of
ones,
course.
they had spent a good bit of time in the classroom, so they knew where you were coming from.
Yes.
And so I think more so even, I mean, the courses and being, once you get off into administration, I would assume you probably lose a little bit of sight of the day to day.
Hmm.
We also had changes, like for instance, when I first started teaching, we had 55-minute classes.
Mm,
And then at some point throughout my career, we changed to 90-minute classes. Well, the administrators had never taught a 90-minute class, so they
right.
didn't know the struggles that you had with 90-minute classes. So I think it would be a good idea that, and I don't know how to do this, but I think it'd be a good idea if occasionally administrator picked up a class and in their area, and they for a year they teach a class. Maybe they do abbreviated administration job, but then teach a class for a year to kind of get back into the trenches and to
Yeah,
know what.
walk in the shoes of a teacher, right?
Absolutely.
So the challenge here is, giving somebody a leadership role who is not really fully experienced in the classroom.
Absolutely. And
Mm,
the thing is, we can take that one step back. Teachers need to realize that once upon a time they were sitting where the students are sitting,
yes.
and they were looking at these teachers thinking, this person's old because they're
Mm.
almost 30 or whatever.
Yes.
And they need to realize teachers sometimes do the same thing. They
Mm,
forget what it was like to be a student in elementary school or high school or whatever.
right, right.
So just like the same thing that I'm telling that administrators should remember what it's like to be a teacher, teachers should remember what it's like to be a student.
If you were face to face with a brand new teacher going into the classroom for the first time next September or next semester,
Mhm.
what is one piece of golden advice that you'd give them?
Well, I actually did that recently. Of course, it was teaching adults, but I
Mm,
worked with somebody. One thing that I would want to do is I would want to observe them a little bit. I'd want to see them teach some people, and then get an idea. As I said before, you've got to see your body language. You got to see your voice quality. You've got to see if the person can't speak very well in public, if the person turns toward the board and
mm,
talks to the board. I mean, these little tiny things, students are gonna not be engaged with them.
mhm,
So number one would be to see about their projection and their ability to stand and public speaking, I guess you could
mhm.
say. That would be one thing that I'd like to see. If I'm not actually watching them, then I would,
Exactly. What if you don't have the
if
opportunity?
I
Like
don't
I
have the
sent you,
opportunity.
I mean, I sent you a
Gotcha.
message on your Instagram because I
Hmm.
saw your book and I said, "Hey, I'm a new teacher and I'm freaking out. What what's
Yeah,
your advice for me?"
that I guess I would try to say first, look back at what is it that you're freaking out about?
Hmm.
Are the students rowdy? Do you not feel like you know your material well enough?
I'm nervous.
Um,
I don't know
are you,
if
yeah,
I'm ready for the classroom.
exactly. You've
Hmm.
got the nerves.
Hmm.
Number one, I would say get over it.
Hmm.
I don't mean that to sound bad, but I mean
Right.
you're gonna be that way.
Hmm.
I don't think there was a class that I taught in 40 years that when I first engaged the people for a little while that I wasn't a little bit nervous or
Hmm.
didn't sleep well the night before.
Hmm.
So some of that you have to realize comes with the territory. The other is find some way to start off the class getting to know the students.
Hmm.
I would say have some in elementary. They have like some little games. In high school, it just go around and
Icebreakers.
and icebreakers,
Right.
talk about it, tell a little story. things of this nature, and kind of ease into before you actually get into your material. Also, listen to the students. Tell me about yourself a little bit. So get to know that. And then eventually, and this is a chapter in the book too, you're going to get to a place where you have to discuss some classroom rules. So there's a lot of different ways to go into that. In my case, it had to do more with every rule had to do more with respect.
Right.
To not only respect me, but respect each other, even respect yourself. So I would talk to a brand new teacher about getting hold of those nerves a little bit, or just use that energy, that nervous energy. And number one, too, now that we're talking about it, just is confidence. You've got to display confidence, even if it may sound bad to say if it's fake, but
this is where the acting comes in.
That's where the acting comes in. That you're confident that you not only can teach them, but we're going to have a wonderful time in here, and you're going to learn, and you're going to learn. And I've had students. I mean, I don't mean to, pat myself on the back, but I've had students say, "This is my favorite class. I look forward to this class every day."
Yes.
And of course that can be too, because the teacher just goofs off and doesn't have them do anything. But I challenged my students, but in such a way that sometimes they didn't even realize they were working. So these types of discussions is what I would have. I don't have a magic bullet to say, if you do this and everything's going to be wonderful.
Right.
Right. Expect to feel sometimes like you failed. You're just going to, and then just stop and don't put it on the student. Well, those students were so this and they were this.
Yes.
Put it on yourself.
Applause.
Why?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Okay. Well, you don't have a magic bullet, but you do have a book.
Yes.
And so how do I get myself a copy of your book? Where do I go?
Okay, well, 30 Insights, I don't know if it'll be on there or not. I'm going to put it up here. This is on every bookseller. I don't know if we advertise any or not, but
Amazon.
Amazon. Okay, there you go.
Is there an Amazon link I could put in the show notes?
There, you can go to Amazon and just type in 30 Insights for New Teachers to Thrive. I don't have a link per se.
Okay, I'll find the link. I'm going to put it in the show notes for anybody who wants a copy of your book.
Wonderful. As well as Barnes & Noble, Goodreads. I mean, I've gone through all of them just to look and see. And it's an e-version as well. There's hardback, paperback, and e-version, the electronic. So I don't know if you...
Is there an audiobook? Is there an audiobook?
There's not an audio. No,
not yet, eh? Okay, well, that's what you're going to have to work on.
No, but yeah. But the reason I mentioned the ebook, I don't know how far your podcast goes, but I've had several people from other countries contact me interested in the book, and sometimes it's easier for them to get it through the electronic version.
Right on. Okay.
Maybe than the other. So it's in all formats in that way.
Sounds good.
They can definitely find it pretty easily, and hopefully find it as and also CurtRichards.com tells a little bit about the book, and they can find some links on there.
Nice. Okay, I'm going to have all these links in the show notes if somebody is interested in pursuing a copy of their book. I thank you so much for your time. I thank you so much for your experience and your chat with me and with the listeners. I'm sure a lot of listeners, new teachers, are going to take a lot of benefit from this interview.
I certainly appreciate it and enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
You're welcome.
That's our show for today. Share this episode with your teacher friends who might benefit from listening to it. And of course, please rate this episode and subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so. I'm Ramos Takawi, and this is Legendary Educator. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you next time.